Welcome to Eternal Journey, the podcast.
What is up, everyone? Welcome back for another episode of Eternal Journey, the podcast that talks about all things eternal with a focus on limited play. I am your friendly neighborhood Jedi, also known as Caesar the Crowd Pleaser. And this week on episode 25 of the podcast, we're going to be talking about something that is a very big part of the game, even if it is not quote unquote part of the game strategy. And this is dealing with tilt. This is something that both competitive and casual players have dealt with and will deal with and will continue to deal with, and a little more on the competitive side, but still you experience across the board. It's kind of like the source of the bad beat stories and things like that. Going a little more in depth into it in a moment. But first, I want to go ahead and mention our YouTube channel. This is EJ the Podcast, where you could be watching this show live, or not live, but watching it on the screen of your phone, tablet, iPad, or TV. And yeah, this is where you can find the content I produce, offline stuff. I have draft videos, constructive videos, you name it. I got it on there, a couple of unboxings and things like that. So definitely check it out. This is EJ the Podcast. Just helps you catch my content whenever it is convenient for you. So appreciate that. Next up, you can catch me streaming live every Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday mornings at twitch.tv/Jedi_EJ. Come hang out, let me know. Come in and let me know what your most recent tilt story is. I'd love to hear it. We can hopefully kind of group therapy each other so we don't have to deal with it again in the future. All right. One last thing, guys. I have chosen, when I first started, to not have a Patreon. I feel like I want to build a solid following and community first. And when I realized that this is something that a lot of people do enjoy and feel like it is worth their time, then I will consider doing one. So for now, one of the ways that people can support me and this channel is on Twitch subscriptions. So I wanted to start giving a shout out each week to my most recent subscriber, or at least one of them, because eventually I might get to the point where I get more than one a week. So, and we might modify it to a random subscriber or just all the subscribers that came in that week for the first time. But either or, I want to go ahead and give a shout out this week. And turns out it works out well because they actually listen to the podcast. So hopefully they can feel the love that I appreciate their support very much so, which is Yistout. That's right. Yistout, you rock. Thank you so much for the subscription. It means a lot to me. Both in monetary support to improve the channel, as well as the fact that you felt that you are getting something out of this content that is worth, showing a little bit of support. So thank you. Thank you, Yistout, so much. I really appreciate it. With that being said, that moves us into our pack one, pick one, guys. Sweet. So, wow, this is actually a pretty interesting pack. It's got a lot of playables. I'll give you guys a quick overview, look at our picks, and yeah, because we've been in the format quite a bit now. I think most people that are playing have a fairly decent understanding of the cards and whatnot. I will describe some of the higher picks for our new listeners, but let's go into it. At the common slot, we have Devotee of Sands, which is the 1/3 mage at 2 time, and it gives you +1 power, maximum power, and you can shift it for the same cost. So you just have to decide on whether you want to block or attack with it to trigger onslaught, or make sure it stays alive to maintain that ramp. Arcanum Elite is the 1/1 flyer for 1 and time. Onslaught, you and one of your other units, that is important, gets a +2 health. You gain 2 life and it pumps up one of your guys. Works really well with twist units. Next up, we have Rallying Sergeant, the 4/4 Oni for 5 red. Onslaught, +3 attack, so it becomes a 7/4. We have Blurry Chaser, one of our premier 2-drops, 1/3 Yeti Explorer for 2 and a red. Quick draw, pay 1, twist Blurry Chaser to Scout. This card is awesome. It's great early. It's great because it's a good attacker and you're able to bottom any, or make sure you find your power plays. And then late game, it's still a pretty decent attacker, but mainly you can scout or twist to scout and push those additional sigils you don't need to the bottom of your deck and draw gas. Next up is Daring Maneuver. This is the fast spell for 2 and a red. Give a unit a +2/+2 and overwhelm. This card is awesome. I think it's a really solid combat trick. Both pluses, it's great on the offense and great on defense. And the overwhelm means that not only are you going to take out one of their units and keep yours alive, but you're also going to get in some additional damage, which is great in aggressive decks. We have Retribution. I think is the strongest common in the set. It is silence and stun an enemy unit for at slow speed for 3 and a green, and then it has onslaught, then kill it. That's right. So close to unconditional and premium removal at this pace or rate, I should say. We do have eviscerate that just straight up kills something, but this thing doing it at 3, and the fact that you could even use it aggressively, just stunning a unit or silencing it to get in additional damage is awesome. So I like Retribution, and it's just great. So despite Blurry Chaser and Devotee of Sands being really solid picks, I think Retribution is our front runner for our pack 1 pick 1. Next up, we have Yes Faithful with a solid 2-drop. But I mean, it's kind of funny actually that we have Devotee of Sands and Arcanum Elite both kind of go hand in hand. Then we have Blurry Chaser and Daring Maneuver that go hand in hand. And then Yes Faithful and Retribution that go hand in hand. That's kind of funny. Interesting pack. Like, people are going to get rewarded. But yeah, we're not taking over Retribution. Fledging Owlet, the 1/1 Flying Warp. Yeah, no, that's not a thing. At the uncommon slot, we have some pretty solid cards, honestly. Man, this pack is stacked. We have Chemo's Blueprints. Draw a weapon from your choice from your deck. Draw a weapon of your choice from your deck. Onslaught, it gets a +1/+1. Meh, not bad, but it's a filler. It helps you get your Mithril Mace and turn it into a 4/5, which is solid. We have Peak Top Trekker, which is the 2/2 Explorer for 3 blue. It has Overwhelm, and then when you scout, Peak Top Trekker gets a +2/+2 permanently. So yeah, this is a solid card in the Skycrag Scout deck, but it's not gonna take out a Retribution. And finally, we have Death Ripple. This is the slow spell for 3 and a shadow. Kill an enemy unit with cost 4 or less. Your shifted units get +2 attack. So some additional bonus, but with a slight limitation on the removal aspect of it. Yeah, I think I still, even though Death Ripple is awesome, don't get me wrong, Death Ripple is amazing, I still think Retribution is the pick. But our rare might actually challenge that, which is Ollie, Maniacal Grave Robber. This is a 2/1 rogue for 2 Shadow. He has Deadly, he has Quick Draw, which pretty much means he can attack as much as he wants. And they have to block at the bare minimum with 3 different guys to kill him. And he's still going to take 2 of them down, which is already awesome. But he has some additional attacks. Shift 4. When one of your other units dies while Ollie is shifted, give it Voidbound, and Ollie gets its attack and health. Yeah, this card is awesome. It can easily steamroll and run away with the game. You play this early, it gets in for some damage, you know, not really exciting, but it's still fine, serviceable, right? Especially if you're able to modify it with the equipment. But then if you play it late and you have some kind of a board presence, you are able to just kind of either aggressively block your opponent's attacks to sacrifice some of your guys, or the flip side to that, get in with some medium attacks, and then your opponent has to decide on whether, for example, let's say you have just a lonely Manila 2/2 on the board, right? And it's just sitting there on defense. Well, you could play Ollie and then attack with it. And chances are the opponent has an easy way of blocking and killing it at no cost to them. But then now they're going to have to deal with a 4/3 Ollie, right? And you kind of somewhat upgraded your 2/2 into a bigger, better unit. So you can either get in additional damage your opponent may not want to pump up Ollie, or they block and then you get a really strong Ollie that is going to be a must answer effect. It's also combos really well with a lot of like medium units like the 3/4 Vorlunk, or let's say for example a 4/4 Rallying Sergeant or 7/4 Rallying Sergeant, right? They can't take 7, but at 4 health it's easy to block and kill it, right? Well, they have to decide, are they going to take 7? Or are they going to try to chump block and sacrifice their board presence to not take 7 and not pump Ollie? Or are they going to block your Rallying Sergeant for a little bit of value, stopping the 7 power and killing the rallying sergeant, but then all of a sudden Ollie now becomes a 9/5 with quick draw and deadly. So it's a great card. It's awesome. I've never been disappointed playing it, and it's been quite a grown test enabler playing against it. So yeah, here I think it would be powerful enough to win out Retribution, so I will take Ollie and Maniacal Grave Robber. All right, guys, that is going to do it for our pack one, pick one, and our opening stuff. So let's go ahead and dive right into our main topic. What is tilt? So tilt is essentially when you let your emotions get the better of you because of a misplay or a loss or a top deck or just something that is happened in the game. A misclick, that's a thing that happens digitally, something that you don't really have to deal with in real life because you can communicate what you're trying to do. But online, in a digital card game, there is chances where you do something that is completely off the wall, incorrect, that you knew about. It just ended up being a misclick. Happens a lot in MTGO. Arena and Eternal do a little bit better job of preventing that, but it does happen. You guys have seen me on stream. And yeah, tilt is a thing. It is an emotional response to a somewhat logical action or something that happens. And it's us being humans, and it's something that we deal with on a regular basis when you are any kind of a competitive person, because it's hard to shrug off a loss or a potential misplay. In fact, I recently, in the last draft I did, made a critical error based on not understanding a game mechanic for a specific card. And so I, long story short, used a combat trick when I did not need to. And so it ate up my power for the turn, so I was not able to continue to develop my board. And 2 turns later, it turns out that had I developed my board and kept that combat trick in my hand, I would have been able to win the game clear as day. Like, they were tapped out, no power open, and the board state was in a position that if I had played that unit and had the combat trick in my hand, I would have won. And so it was tough. I got a little frustrated with myself there. But once again, that one was a little bit easier to shrug off because of the fact that I understood that it wasn't necessarily a misplay on my strategy, just that I didn't have the correct information. I didn't understand a specific game mechanic and how it operated in this game. Figured it just kind of went with my standard default Magic rules, but it still visually bothered me a little bit, and I took a second to deal with it. So we are going to discuss this topic today because I do think even if it isn't directly strategic gameplay, it does offer benefits to both constructed and limited, and just in life in general. So how does tilt affect us? Why is it important? It is important, and it does affect us because in the manner that, sorry, I'm not sure what's going on with my words today, but anywho, it can lead to all kinds of side effects. When you are tilted, you have a negative emotional response. You're in a slightly different mind state because you're a little more emotional. And so it leads to a couple of things. The first that we typically see is people, and that's why we call it tilt, because if you remember the old pinball machines, if they were kind of like jolted and jerked too many times and stuff like that, and things got out of whack, it sent out an alarm that said tilted and you can't play, etc. And so this is similar, which I thought was always kind of funny and cute, or however you want to describe it. But first and basic thing is the fact that you just stop playing. You're like done. You're like, nope, I'm out. This is ridiculous. I can't believe this happened, etc., etc. And you call it a day. And that in of itself is obviously, I mean, it's not wrong, but it's also, if you're in the middle of a tournament or you had planned on playing for a couple hours and you enjoyed the game, the fact that it put a bad taste in your mouth and had a negative effect on your experience is the first and most common way that it affects you. And yeah, that's hard to deal with. It's really bad when you sit there and you have a bad beat about a game that or something that you enjoy doing. And so that is the base level of it, and why tilt is so important. Some people do find it quite humorous when they see other people tilt and things like that, but at the end of the day, it is quite the negative effect. There are some benefits to it that we'll talk about here later, but Another thing that happens is that you decide to, you feel like embarrassed. And because of that, you continue down a path to try to mitigate that tilt or hide it, which could lead to suboptimal gameplay. You've heard me say that several times on the stream where, yes, I made a mistake, but I am not going to allow it to dictate my future plays. Let's go ahead and readjust, reevaluate, and take the correct line, even if it now is slightly suboptimal. And what I mean by this is, for example, let's say you, I don't know, I'm trying to think. It's hard to think of something that makes sense. But let's say, for example, you attack with a 3-3 and not realizing that your opponent, and you had a sharpened reflex and not realizing that your opponent had a 4-4 in play, right? Pretty easy tilt, and maybe that's what's going to cost you the game. But let me think. So that's mistake one. You start to tilt. Then your opponent decides to block, and you decide that to hide the fact that you really didn't want to attack into their 4-4, you sharpen reflex your 3-3. That way you kill their guy, but it's going to cost you. You're going to be down 2 cards to their 1. You know what I mean? If that makes a little bit of sense. Whereas the quote unquote bigger player, someone that's dealt with tilt a little bit more, will be like, hey, look, that was a bad attack. I messed up. Cool, kill my guy and we'll move on. I'm better using the sharpened reflex to 2-for-1 you instead of myself. You know, something like that. It's a little bit more of a narrow case scenario because more often than not, it's just a one isolated mistake, but it does come up sometimes. I've heard occasional pros talk about it as well, especially when it happens a lot when people are on camera. That's typically when you see that, where people want to hide the fact that they made a mistake and continue down a less optimal play, hoping to justify it or make people think like, oh, I'm sure they're following a certain line in their head, etc. Another version of tilt is when you just kind of try to push through it. And so you're in a very emotional state and you keep playing, but you're making more aggressive plays than you should, or you're playing a little too fast. So you continue down this downward spiral that just makes your tilt even worse. So you make one misplay, it tilts you or your opponent top decks. And then instead of taking a moment to think about your next play, when you top deck your next card, you're just like, all right, whatever, swing with this. And then, they blow you out. You made like another suboptimal play, and then it just causes you to tilt further because you're like, oh, that was dumb. Why'd I do that? And so that's that's probably the most dangerous one of all of them, honestly, because sometimes the game could be salvageable. I mean, don't get me wrong. Sometimes it ends the game. Like they top deck the exact card they needed after you played really well, which has happened to us before, which heck, we just saw it at Worlds. I forgot what game it was, but a player was down the majority of the game, and then they managed to stabilize, and they had just started to turn the corner or go on the offensive. So they were at 3 life, and I think they went 3 or 4 turns where they were able to start attacking slowly, keep up defenses so they wouldn't die. And after all that, they were probably 2 turns away from winning with the current board state. And then the player that was originally on the beatdown and ahead top decks the torch and kills them. You know what I mean? So there it could very easily be, and I think that was actually game 5 and knocked them out of the tournament. And so there it was a game ending experience or, top deck. And so they might still be tilt off that, and it won't affect them so much other than they just feel like it leaves them with a bad taste in their mouth overall about the tournament, regardless of doing well and making tons of money. But there could have been a point where, oh, okay, I'm playing my Ikaria and now I'll be able to win the game because they have no answer to it. And you attack forgetting that they have like the 1/1 Death Touch flyer, or that you saw the wasp, the deadly wasp in their hand, and that tilts you. So there, you didn't lose the game, you just lost your win con. So instead of continuing on this tilt path and start playing recklessly, you need to collect yourself and be like, okay, what's the next way that I can do to continue, or next set of plays or line I can take to continue to win. So that is, I think I'm dabbling a little in, but that's another way that tilt affects us. And then lastly, with our friends, obviously it puts you in a bad mood. And so you might be a little salty if you're in a tournament with a group of friends and someone had a good round, they want to talk about it. You end up giving them a negative reaction because you are still kind of tilted from your earlier round. And no one likes that. Or if you do commentary, or if you get interviewed, all those kinds of things, or you describe a board state in a way that it isn't as accurate as you'd like it, or it should be, because you tilted. So you describe some really bad beat story where that's not going to help you learn from the scenario. But yeah, that is tilt in a not so nutshell. And now we're going to discuss what can we do to prevent tilt, or better deal with it, to do, for our life and future gameplay as well. Because like I said, this is something that happens every day. You can be fixing something on your car, and then your one favorite tool breaks or something, and then you get super tilted and you end up not, walking away and not fixing the car, where either you could have gone to the store or called a friend to bring you their tool to at least fix your car in the meantime, something like that. And that is very off the hip, but it is somewhat accurate. Or maybe you don't get the promotion that you were trying to go for, or someone that you didn't think was going to applied for it. So when you go in for the interview or evaluation, you're a little bit tilted about that, and it throws off your answers. Things like that all come into play. And then obviously I described all the ways it plays into effect with a card game. And one other thing that just popped in my head was, you get that bad beat feel where you're tilting. You're like, great, yeah, they're just going to always have it. They're going to top deck every single thing. And so instead of all of a sudden readjusting and trying to play your outs, you're like, yeah, of course I'm going to just straight draw power. Like, that's it. I'm out of gas. And so you don't make the most optimal plays because you've checked out mentally. There you go. I can't believe it took me that long to say that term. That's what I mean. Tilting is an easy way to essentially check out mentally from a game. Okay, so let's go into the ways that we can prevent this or mitigate the damage that tilting does. First off, we can take a moment to feel the frustration. I've done some life coaching in my lifetime. I think a big thing that people kind of forget is the fact that they are allowed to be human and react to things in a human or emotional state. So I think the first things that people need to do and help is to accept that you tilted, identify it, and kind of be in the moment for a limited amount of time. That is the one thing I do stress. There's a meme I saw a while back, which always gives me a kick when I see it, and it goes along, I'm paraphrasing, but it goes along the lines are you having a bad day, or did you just have a bad 5 minutes that you're milking for 24 hours? And I think it's very true. It's super true. One thing can happen and it frustrates you and it's an issue, but you still have the rest of the day to improve that mood or to just not let it dwell. And so that's why I say accept the tilt for a limited amount of time. Get it out of your system, so to speak. So you make a misplay, take a second, be like, oh my God, I can't believe I messed up. That was dumb. It was on the board. I can't believe I didn't see it. Or of course they would have top decked. Or like, man, if I had attacked with this 3/3 or emerged unit 4 turns ago, they would have been 3 less and died. Or I missed damage that could have easily been prevented, et cetera, et cetera. Feel with it, deal with it, and then be like, okay, that happened. I won't make that mistake again. Time to move forward and kind of shrug it off. Let it roll off your back, like rain off of a duck's back, so to speak. And that way you identify it, you add a little bit of validity to it, so you don't kind of pretend like, oh no, I'm fine. And it's kind of dwelling in the background, festering. You don't want that. So you accept it, and maybe audibly saying it might be enough to take the pressure off. I'm saying, if you're in a live stream and you mess up, you're just, hey, yeah, guys, I'm sorry. I totally misplayed. I don't know, like maybe I was paying attention to the chat, or I don't know why I missed it. That was dumb. It is what it is. You guys know I'm a better player. I know I'm a better player, but mistakes happen. Cool. And just kind of voicing it, maybe having some people give you a nod too. I've had my opponent nod, I've been in tournaments, or I've done it myself, where my opponent does something and I kind of give them a look like, okay. And then we do it, and then they just kind of like, yep, throw their arms up. They're like, that, yeah, totally didn't see that. I don't know what I was thinking. My bad. I'm like, it happens to the best of us, man. No worries. And this is my opponent. And sometimes that's enough to kind of deal with it. Next up, we have take a moment to let it go. Walk away, grab a drink. So that is one of the benefits we have to being a digital exclusive card game where you've heard it from multiple people on multiple podcasts and even seen it on stream, where people walk away straight up. Like, for example, the ECQs, you have to play, 20 something games. I believe it was 27, 28 games, but you don't have to play them consecutively. And I've done it, and you hear many people do it where they will play 5 or 6 games, and if they have 2 losses or they have a bad game that they didn't feel like they played well, they'd get up, walk away, go grab a drink, maybe eat something, play a different game for a little bit, like just do a ton of things to give themselves time to process our initial, what we said earlier about feeling the moment and then moving on. And so it gives you time to kind of shrug it off. I'm sure that's happened to everyone, where something is bothering you for 10, 15 minutes, but an hour down the line, when you rethink about that, you're like, oh, okay, I don't feel nearly as bad about it as I did at the moment. And so take advantage of that. Like I said, walk away, do something, stand up, talk to chat, do something. Nothing says that you have to. I mean, granted, if you're in the middle of a game, then you have to finish the game. But when you are offered, like I said, let's say it's in that scenario that I talked about earlier, where maybe instead of it being game 5, it was game 3. And so they racked up their second loss, but they still have a game to play, right? Well, they can take a minute or two before they have to come back into that game. And that gives you enough time to avoid what we were talking about, where you're mentally checked out or you're too emotional. And so you don't see lines of play that you normally would. And yeah, it's great. And like I said, when you're in a tournament or a position where you are able to draft is another example. If you have one of those things where you're like, yeah, I just played like garbage, I can't believe this. Cool, walk away, do something else, maybe play a little bit of Gauntlet or something, and then come back refreshed and ready to start anew. The next thing I like to do to help alleviate or mitigate the effects of tilt is to play a different format or game. I alluded to that earlier, and yeah, once again, we go back to the scenario. If you are not in a timed event or time sensitive event, to go ahead and change gears for a little bit, go try a different format. That way I kind of like this version of essentially doing something similar, but in a different light, because it causes your brain to activate again, or forces you, like, that whole saying where the body can only take one pain at a time, like it only processes one pain at a time. It's kind of similar. So if, let's say, you tilted and constructed, right? You're pissed at your deck, you're pissed at yourself, etc., etc. You move on to, let's say, playing draft or casual and play like a combo deck or something. There's a good chance that your brain, you'll start to, at the moment, like start to think less about what you tilted on and more about the strategy of what you're actively doing. Same thing, especially when it's a different game altogether. Like playing some more Eternal could have the effect, like I said, changing formats, doing something a little more fun, less pressure. So you end up joking around a little bit more, or just straight up playing an entirely different game helps quite a bit, because what happens is, like I said, you start to think about that game and you're involved in that game. And so you think less about what happened with Eternal, and you're able to kind of reset your emotions and brain state. So all of a sudden you're like, you might mess up a couple of things in the new game, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh man, I'm messing up, let me tighten back up again. And you lock it in, and then you're kind of reset to go back to Eternal and finish off your games with a fresh start and look. Next up, we have identifying the mistake and how to prevent it in the future. This includes things like, was it a gameplay mistake? Was it a tactical mistake? A misunderstanding of mechanics? Were you distracted? Was your mind state, not in it? All these things are very important. It is very important to take that mistake or that thing that happened that caused you to tilt, identifying what it was that created the tilt, so you are able to prevent it in the future, as well as kind of, once again, going back to that logical side of your brain, identifying it and seeing a means to correct it, so you can kind of talk yourself out of it. Like, for example, let's go with distraction, right? I am recently started, I'm less than 6 months into my streaming career, and there have been times where, I've had to use that cop out of like, man, I was too busy reading chat, or I was distracted by chat. And like I said, I know it can be a cop out, but for those of you that have been watching streamers quite a bit, it is a thing. Like, especially if you're having 2 or 3 conversations at a time, it's hard to keep track of chat, say what you're going to say, read the people responses, and then come back to a game where you have a new board state and you have to adjust. And, sometimes it's minor things where I forgot to play a sigil for, pre-combat for value. Like I might have a Hojin play, I just attack and then I play the sigil. I'm like, oh man, or a pump spell, something like that. You know what I mean? And sometimes it's game losing, like, okay, I need to play this specific sigil so I can play these two spells. And I'll literally say that. Then, I'll swing, do whatever, go back to talking with chat. And then when chat's done, I'll come back to game, play the wrong sigil, cast one unit, and then go to cast the other spell or unit and be like, wait, what? Oh my God. And so it's one of those things where I've made that adjustment. You know what I mean? I identified that, like, okay, it wasn't a misplay as far as like I played at a lesser, like it wasn't something that missed me. I just got distracted. And so that helps me kind of deal with the tilt, because I'm like, okay, cool. It wasn't on me. Like it wasn't the fact that I missed the play. Like my skill set lacked, is the reason. No, I just needed to be a little bit more attentive to the game, or partition my brain power to chat and the game a little bit better. And so there have been times where I've told chat now, hey guys, hold on, give me a second. Like I need to think about this. And so, I feel like chat understands now. They know I'm not ignoring them. I just need a second to get quiet, go into the tank, and think about my next couple of plays. I mentioned the aforementioned mistake where I didn't understand a game mechanic. That one, same scenario as with the chat. Like it wasn't that I lacked the skill set or I played suboptimally. I just literally didn't understand the mechanic, and sometimes you have to do it. I didn't think about it. And I've done that with chat as well. Like, hey guys, does this work the way I think it does? No, it doesn't. Okay, cool. Or like, oh, okay. But I thought I understood it. And so I just dove forward, and then I'm like, wait, what just happened? And okay, cool. Lesson learned. I understand that mechanic now, and I can move on. So I know I won't make that mistake again. The ones that are the toughest for me to do are the gameplay mechanics, where I actually made the misplay. Like, yep, that was a suboptimal play, or that line was incorrect. Those are the ones that tilt me the worst, because I do identify that I am a slightly above average player, not much above, but I do like to consider myself, the ability to occasionally spike a tournament and stuff like that. And I just get really hard on myself on those incremental advantages or disadvantages, because I feel like I need to win every game that I can win. So when I get power screwed, or I draw 5 sigils in a row and things like that, when my opponent draws gas, I can afford those kinds of losses. And then that's another one as well. There you go. Like, look at that. Let's go back to that scenario with the worlds, where they were at 3 life for 5 or 6 turns and were doing great. Stabilized, came back, and then they lost. Well, one could be like, yep, that's right, lucky top deck. Like, it is what it is. And then they tilt on that. But can you identify where maybe there was a block or a removal or an interaction you could have done to prevent some unnecessary life loss? And so they would have been at 5 or 6 instead of 3. And then the top deck lightning bolt, or torch, would not have worked. You know what I mean? It's things like that. And I have done that. You guys have catch me on stream where I'm like, okay, I should have blocked there. Let's just take into account I'm at 14 now and see. Or vice versa. We're like, yeah, I missed 3 points of damage. Let's see how the game plays out if they were at, 3 less life. And sometimes it's like, yep, it didn't matter. Like, we never touched them again. Or like other times I'll be like, well, we died and they were at 2, so the 3 life would have mattered. Things like that. And identifying that makes it a little more professional, if you will, and improves, where it's like, okay, it's a mistake. I hate that it happens. It cost me a game, but I am at least able to learn from this. And so I have a less likely chance of doing this again. Those are really important. Do that. And like I said, you guys heard me say it before, the losses that I'm able to take the easiest, for the most part, like obviously if it costs me a top 64, top 8 finish in a tournament, it still kind of tilts me a little bit, but are the non-games, like, all right, we kept the 2, we mulled down to 6, we got 2 sigils, and we never saw our 3rd sigil. All right, like our 3rd power. Yeah, okay. Like, I lost that game. It's tough, but it was out of my hand. I did all the right things. And so I won't tilt as hard. Let's see. Next up, we have keep track on whether it would have cost you the game or not. Well, I just mentioned that earlier. Yeah. There's a way to adjust from tilting as well, where like, oh man, I missed 3 damage. Crap. If we never do another damage to them or we die with them at 6, well, the 3 damage didn't matter. So it wasn't that big of a tilt and I could deal with that. Or vice versa. Like, okay, yeah, we killed them with, we missed those 3 points of damage, but then they died at a -8. So it didn't matter. So it wasn't that big of a punt. Things like that really help. If you mold, like, okay, we had a chance to mold one more time, but we kept 2 lander, let's see, or 2 power, let's see what happens. Okay, we drew our power, we're good to go. Or like, so we were fine keeping that hand. Or, hey, no, yeah, we should have shifted. We got stuck on 2 power. And sometimes this could be worse, sometimes it could be better, but it's important to identify that, keep track of that, because sometimes it will kind of save you a lot of trouble. And you'll be like, well, I guess that didn't matter. Or blocking with this guy to kill their guy didn't matter. Like that unit never attacked again. So, and finally, our last one is going to be understand what was a punt and not make it a poor me, and understand that it could happen to anyone, which I've kind of mentioned that throughout this podcast already, but it's a mistake. Like most times when you tilt, it's because of a mistake. We are human, mistakes happen. As I mentioned earlier, identifying why it happened helps. Were you distracted? Were you thinking about something, a mechanic, or just straight up, yeah, I played bound. That was I should have taken extra time to think of another line. Or sometimes chat will say a line that I just didn't see. I'm like, hey, you were completely right. I would have never seen that line. Good call. Thank you. And so lesson learned, that was a suboptimal play. I needed to open up my brain and see a better one. And now I have another avenue to look at. Those top decks, same thing. Like it just happens. It's variance. Don't be like, yeah, every single time this happens. There was a stream I did where literally I think out of, let's say if we did like 9 games, if we won, right? We went 7-2. I think at least 5 or 6 of them, my opener was a 1 power hand. And it's just variance. It's what can happen. I mentioned it obviously, but I wasn't like, oh great, what do you know, another one? Well, I guess we're going to lose this game or go down to 6. No, like identify that it's something that's out of your control. It's a thing that happens and you move on. Like it wasn't a decision you made. And the same thing with the punts. Like, yeah, sometimes you will punt a game. I've done it. It was one of my first ECQs, and it's even on video if you guys want to check it out. I made a huge misplay error, and it was enough that I think it wasn't that I lost the game. I think I just missed a winning. Like I missed lethal, and it turned out that I never had the opportunity to kill my opponent again, and they ended up winning that game. And so, yeah, like I tilted super hard. I walked away, came back, and even did all my stuff to mitigate that. But I understood, like, hey, like I missed lethal, and it is a thing that happens. Like that's all it was. I don't do it consistently, but it does happen. But all right, guys, that's all I got. I hope you use some of these tips to help you both in life and Eternal when you are playing and tilt comes into effect. It is a very important thing that we all have to deal with. And I think the sooner you learn how to deal with it, the better off you are. So let me know in the comments below, or come hang out on Twitch and let me know what your last or biggest tilt scenario was. I'd love to hear from it and discuss and kind of figure things out together. I enjoy it quite a bit. So yeah, let me know in the comments below. Moving on to our next section or topic or segment is just a little bit of constructed. I managed to hit masters on the same day, both in draft and constructed. The draft deck was a Rakano deck. Worked out really well. I think I took a Heretic's Cannon and 2 Streets of Flames. I don't think I had any really great rares or anything like that. It just ended up being a great all-around Rakano deck that did some solid things with Blurry Chaser and things like that. But yeah, and then the big thing is that I managed to make it all the way through Diamond. I made it to Diamond using Rakano Valkyries because it just ends up being the deck that a combination of Rakano Valkyries and a super low to the ground Yetis deck that I mentioned, I believe, in the previous podcast. But another shout out to Tall, Shark, and Handsome on the Eternal Struggle podcast, because he had mentioned on one of their brews of the week a Yetis deck by Allison, and I went ahead and checked it out, and it's a little It's 100% Yetis. Like the only non-Yeti unit in the deck is the Skycrag Smuggler, and it has tons of Yeti synergies, including the Yeti Sight, which I went ahead and crafted those and decided to play because it seemed like a fun deck, and the deck was a ton of fun. Used it on stream and made masters with it, so it's got some legitimacy to it. Don't know why that tongue tied me, but the deck's a ton of fun. I will admit it is a very like a barely scragging by kind of deck. There were plenty of games where like a snowball is what won me the game, like Xaxes more often than not, or just kind of maximizing as much damage as possible out of each unit in your deck. One of the interesting things I like about it is that it does run counter magic. So you are able to, if you counter one hailstorm or one harsh rule, typically that is enough to put you over the top. And the sight was actually surprisingly good. In most cases, the snowball would either kill a Hojin or an Ikaria or pop face Aegis. And the stun was awesome too. They drop a Sadidi or some Avara, and I could just let it resolve and not even bother trying to do anything. I just stun it with the sight and get in there for damage. So the sight is surprisingly well. I think Throck only came out twice, and I think he might have connected once, but that was for lethal anyways. But yeah, the sight is actually surprisingly good. The Anthem effect is also awesome. And yeah, so just give it a shot, guys. Look over. It's fun. I enjoyed it. Like I said, it was a fun deck. I think the stream really enjoyed it. So yeah. Oh, what's the play? Shoot, almost forgot that. Let's go ahead and load up a what's the play. So our what's the play of the week? This one's an interesting one. I kind of like it quite a bit, and so yeah, it was recent. I believe it was actually the deck that took me to Masters. No, I apologize. It's one more, the one that got me deep into Diamond. Okay. Anyways, long story short. I digress. Let's move on. All right, let's go over the board state. Our opponent is at 20 life. They are Skycrag, Fire, Primal, 6 power. They have the 2/1 Aegis Yeti, a 3/3 Sharpshooter, a 2/1 Blinkwolf, a 3/1 Adept, a 1/2 Drakeling, Snapling, whatever the flyer, a 2/4 Flying Hunting Terriax, and they have 1 card in hand. We are Combre, Time Justice, at 5 power. We have a Horn of Plenty in play, so it gives a +1/+1 to all our units. In play, we have the 4/4 Legion, which is a 5/5 thanks to Horn of Plenty with Endurance and Flying. We have in hand, we have 3 cards. We have the 6/8 Sentinel, the Tomb Protector or whatnot. For all intents and purposes, it's just a vanilla 6/8 for 6 double time. We have the Silverwing bird. Sorry, I forgot the name of it now. But the 1/1 Flying Aegis Lifesteal Bird for 3 and a green. And we have the 1/1. You can shift it for 2. It's 3 and a Justice. And every time you play a spell, it gets a +1/+1 permanently. So that's our hand. So yeah, we're at 10. They have a overwhelming board state and the potential of making the Sharpshooter a first strike or a quick draw at any given time. And we are not able to play our Sentinel or both our 3 drops. So what's the play? So there was a decision earlier in the game whether to play the Horn of Plenty or not. Let me see if I could see it real quick. Maybe not. Maybe I did top deck it. Anywho, I digress. So here's the thing, right? We have the option of they're tapped out, so we 100% attack. There's no reason not to attack and at least get our value there and get our incremental damage, right? So we do attack, we take them down to 15 because our guy's going to have endurance and be able to block. So the question is, and we can't play the protector. So the question is, do we play our Silverwing Familiar or do we play the spell guy? The let me see. 1 second. I want to make sure I can get the name for you guys. So it's the Silverwing versus playing the Sorcerers, Spellskite Sorcerers. So here's the thing, right? We have to decide on whether we want to play a ground unit, and either way, it's gonna be a 2/2, right? We can't afford to not shift it. Maybe we do. I mean, that is a line. The spell, you could shift it, I guess, in hopes of getting it a little bit bigger, but I mean, I don't think that's a thing, especially with us being on the back foot like that. So the decision is, do we want to play a 2/2 that we can trade with their Aegis or one of their 2/1s, and then, you know, do we block the sharpshooter? Do we play our lifesteal unit to potentially block, kill something, and gain some life back, right? So, and we'll actually go in a little in depth in this because actually where to block would be a thing as well. I end up playing the, let's see, because I'm on Twitch, waiting. Oh, that's right. It's gonna be a little because I'm talking through it. So I end up playing the 2/2, the spell Sorceress. Our opponent draws, and then they go to attack. They removed something. It looks like. Hold on. What do they remove? Let's see. So they attack with everything. Obviously, right? They're trading off a unit. Worst case or best case scenario for us is the 3/3 sharpshooter to get in a bunch of damage. So they do attack. So the question is, how do we want to block? We want to chump block the 3/3 so we can play around combat tricks to keep our legionnaire alive, or a legion, because that's our biggest way of coming back from this game. That's probably a more accurate play. Do we block the 3/1 to mitigate damage? Or do we block the 2/1 Yeti with Aegis to make sure we're able to get that off the board, right? And so and they're all viable. And then what do we block with the Legion? So I decide to go ahead and make the most beneficial block to us and block their sharpshooter with our Legion and block the adept with our sorceress, taking 2 of their units off the board, but us taking 7 damage going down to 3. They followed up by a onslaughted on a patrol, right? So we obviously go in for the attack, take them down to 10, and we drew a flash grenade, which was awesome draw for us. Here, that kind of makes me feel like obviously we should have probably blocked the Yeti, but I think it puts us in a really good position because now they will probably attack with everything as well, thinking that they can easily get the 3 damage in. We end up blocking. I believe the way I did it was putting the Silverwing on the Blink Wolf and the Legion on the patrol, and then flash grenading, we're gaining 2, losing 2 from the Yeti, so that balances that out. Oh, wait a minute. Do I actually block the Yeti? Oh, yeah. Okay, sweet. So what I end up doing, I take that back. I put the 5/5 Legion on the Yeti, since that was the only thing that wasn't going to get the -2 attack. And then block our Silverwing on the Oni Patrol because it was going to be a 1/2. So that allows us to take 2 things off the board and take no damage and gain 2 life. And then from there, we pretty much lock up the deal. They play another 3/3 sharpshooter, but we end up drawing a coin that we can make our Silverwing into a 3/3 lifesteal, and we take it down. So a couple of interesting plays. It was very close. We could have easily gotten blown out there. I've made some aggressive blocks, but in my mind, that's how we were going to win it. So there was that argument, you know what I mean? Like, we had the play to our outs, and we just sat there and kind of made all the conservative blocks. I feel like it would have given our opponent too many chances to come back. So I just ended up making the aggressive blocks, and if they had it, we were going to be out anyways. But it worked out in our favor, and we slowly but surely got back there and made it out and take the win. So yeah, guys, that one, like I said, had a couple of interesting plays. I don't think it was just one solid one. Probably the blocking on the next attack was probably the more decision tree based, but overall, it worked out really well. And yeah, that would be our play, or what's the play for the week. I hope you enjoyed it and got a little something out of it. Like I said, it looks like the last episode didn't do as well on the viewers, but granted, I'm not popular enough to really rely on the numbers too much, just because, you know, you need to have a really large sample size for it to make a difference. But I do like to keep these in here. That is part of the reason why I enjoy card games like this, because you can discuss decision trees where there is no wrong answer. So let me know in the comments below what you guys think of it. Next up, we have our sign off. Yeah, that's right, guys. That is the episode. So we're gonna wrap it up here, which means, where can you find me at? You can find me on Twitter and YouTube at EJthePodcast. Find out whenever new content goes up, whenever I'm streaming live, and see videos and whatnot there. Won't spend too much time on it. Check it out. It'd be great to have you guys. If you want to follow my real life stuff, you can follow my Instagram, which is CaesarLebear7 on Instagram, once again, where I post my modeling photos, my performances, and things like that. So check that out. And you can catch me streaming live every Sunday, Monday, Tuesday at twitch.tv/Jedi_EJ. All right, guys, that's going to do it. That's a show. Thank you so much again for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed this slightly off-topic one. Maybe next week, hopefully, we are going to start to get some spoilers. Not really sure. They haven't announced how they're going to inject these spoilers into the meta. So I guess we'll find out on whether it's going to be draft related or not. But we'll probably still talk spoilers and some other things next week. Might do a constructed episode. But all right, guys, thank you so much again for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And until next time, happy gaming.